Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unlocked, where we talk about unlocking the potential of you, the people you work with, and the people you do life with. At the time of this recording, I'm offering all of you, yes, my lovely listeners, a free 15-minute communication coaching call. You come with some kind of communication problem, and I give you a solution. My calendar link is in the show notes, so check that out. Hello, and what we're going to talk about today is something that we all should pay attention to. That is this idea of influence. And if you don't have any influence, you don't have any power. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Lida Citroën is an executive coach, a personal branding consultant, and reputation management expert. She helps global executives, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders manage how they're perceived and drive them towards ideal opportunities. She's helped thousands of individuals around the world gain a fresh perspective on how to craft that personal brand and how to tell the right story. She's the author of 7 books. We're going to talk about her latest one here. Lida writes for Entrepreneur and Military.com. She's authored countless articles featured in her media, Time Magazine, MSNBC, Fortune Magazine, Forbes, Inc., Entrepreneur, Harvard Business Review, Bloomberg, 4,000 other titles on here. It's like she's everywhere, people. She's everywhere. She is, I guess, a person of influence in the space. Can I just say it? A person of influence. And we're going to talk about that whole idea because that's what her new book is about. Here we come. Lida, this is an exciting day for both me and my audience.
Thank you. Well, it's a beautiful day in Colorado, and I hope wherever your audience is that they're enjoying the weather and the environment and ready to buckle in for a great conversation.
Well, I heard today that it's like some rainy, sleet, ice, snow mix in New Jersey. So maybe they're not enjoying that as much. I don't know.
Well, good reason to stay inside and listen to a podcast.
There you go. There you go. In particular, this one, right? In particular, this one. You have this whole idea of influence is something you speak about a lot and talk about a lot. In fact, you wrote a book about it, and we're going to talk about that as well. But first of all, I want to know, out of all the people that we talk to, that we hear, that we listen to in the executive space, in the leadership and coaching and leadership thought, leadership space, if you want to coin that word and all this stuff, why are we even listening to you?
The best response I can give is I walk the talk. I have built an online following. I've built an in-person following. I've built followings in communities that I don't come from. I have lived every principle that I write about in this book. And that is what makes the book so interesting, is these aren't theories from academic research done in ivory towers. This is work that I've been living and doing for 30 years. I don't want to date myself. And I think that makes it a lot more gritty and a lot more applicable. So
how'd you land here?
Nice, I'm
oh yeah, of course you are. Well, how did you even land here though? Like what led you to this particular point right now?
I've spent the last 16, 20 years focused on personal branding, right? How do people position themselves for success? And that built off of a 20-year corporate career where I was doing that for companies and products and services. But personal branding is really about making yourself known to the right people in the right way. And reputation management is an extension of that. As I was doing all that work, it occurred to me that the goal wasn't to have a personal brand that sits on a shelf and you check a box, done, built my brand. But it really was to drive something. It was to drive influence and build trust and have impact, whether that's in a meeting or in a movement. And so the book just kind of stemmed from that. Plus, I'm an example, I think, of a lot of your listeners, maybe even in yourself, where I did what I thought was expected to be able to get the kind of clout that I thought I could have. I wore the right things. I said the right things. I tried to figure out what this thing called gravitas was that they teach is so important. And everybody identifies matters in leadership, but we can't tell you what it is necessarily or how to get it, which I thought was a lot of fun. I took the courses, I read the books, and I couldn't find something that spoke to me as a person. And as I was talking about this, a lot of people, maybe they're from underrepresented groups, maybe they're from marginalized groups, maybe they're just going, I feel like I've got something to say. We're saying there's nothing in the market for us. We don't know how to get there, just like I hadn't known how to get there. And so the book really came from that.
Gravitas. That word. I'm just going to side note this for a second, and we're going to take a detour. You use that word gravitas. I mean, have you gotten a definition of what that means? Like, how are people using that?
People use the word, and no offense to whoever came up with it. It's a je ne sais quoi, right? It's a quality somebody has, and they command attention, and they have charisma, and people take them seriously. That part we seem to have somewhat of a sense around. We can see someone and say, that person has gravitas. But the challenge is, okay, so I have people who want to get it. And how do I teach that? How do I show you to be charismatic if that's not really you? And is that really what it takes anymore? I think there was a day and time where that worked. The person who walked in the room and all heads turned, and that worked at one time. But now the landscape got a lot crowder, and we have social media, and you're finding people who don't have that all of a sudden having tremendous influence. I look at someone like Greta Thunberg, right? At age 15, sits in front of Swedish parliament. And advocates for climate change. I don't think people would say she had gravitas, but did she make a name for herself? Did she start a conversation that wasn't going anywhere and really advance it further? I think most people would admit that. So if you don't have gravitas, how do you do it? And that's where I just thought it was outdated.
I love that thought. And especially as you get into this world of newer generations taking over, and the Xers are probably the start of that whole thing, mm-hmm. But the whole positional power idea of you immediately have my respect because you are in that role and you've been in it for a long time. And now, walking in being skeptical of that leadership at first, and then we're guarding ourselves, and we're trying to make sure we manage ourselves well, and also understand if you're for me or you for yourself. Are we here to collaborate? Are we here to do things together? And that, I think, is that essence of influence. It's no longer about positional power, but it's Absolutely. About the influence that you have on me and my life, and that we have on each other, and how we're going to grow together.
And whether I want to follow you.
Yeah.
Whether I want to get on board with whatever you're trying to get done. And it can be as small as, changing course in a team meeting, and it can be organization wide. But you're absolutely right. And I think for a lot of people, the belief was, when I got to that position of authority, I got the rank, I got the job title, now people would take me seriously. And women struggled with that. I will say, I think a lot of women across corporate America, across, political spectrums, we all felt that, gosh, if we just get the title, we just get to the place, then it'll all happen. And it just doesn't work that way anymore. We're hearing from someone in the back of the room in organizations who has an amazing idea, who doesn't have the title, who doesn't want to be a leader. They just see an opportunity and they want to be able to share it. And I think there's real possibility for companies that embrace that.
So do you believe that, let me just see if I understand you correctly. Do you still believe that women need that title, that it helps, in a certain environment? Or, I mean, how do you coach women or train women in this space to be that, hey, that may be what you think you need, but actually it's this. I mean, do you have those conversations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because again, it's breaking a myth. And when I'll ask them, where does that come from for you? Well, I was taught that. Okay. But that doesn't make it right. Right. And in a totally different example, I remember when I started my company, and I'm a small company, not not like most people, but I'm a small company. And I gave myself the title of principal. I didn't know. I picked it. And I remember a few years in, I called my accountant and I said, is there any reason I couldn't be CEO of the company? Like give myself that title? And she said, no. So overnight, I gave myself a promotion and I became CEO. My influence didn't change, right? My team didn't take me more seriously. And I get it, it's on a smaller scale. But, the positional authority model often drives compliance and coercion, right? I outrank you, therefore you'll do what I say, or your paycheck depends on it, therefore what I say goes. That's very different than influence, which may or may not come with positional authority. So someone who is striving for that label, my job is to make sure they understand what comes with that. And if it doesn't match up, the positional authority won't get you there.
What's the negative consequence of that behavior, of the driving compliance through positional power?
I think that the negative is probably more for the person who believes it's the path to success. I think the team will do what is expected. The team will live up to expectations because they've got a mortgage and kids that need health care, and they keep their job or they leave, right? But for the person who believes that, I know this is going to sound really corny. I feel almost a sadness because there's so much more to leading a team and leading an organization than just telling people what to do. It doesn't tend to bring innovation and risk taking and entrepreneurial mindset, agility. All of that is missed out. So what I advocate for is more of an inclusive, bidirectional type leadership where, yeah, I'm the one who ultimately is accountable, and I will stand up in front and say, this was our decision, but I want your input. I want to know how this works for you. And that's how we're all going to learn and grow. I think that is so much of a richer experience for most people. So it almost makes me sad when somebody thinks now it's just a job title. You're missing out on so much.
So introduce us to the book then, based on this setup. And there it is. If you're watching this video, there it is. The new rules of influence. If we talk about that, and you're saying there's new rules to influence, like immediately on the cover, I go, well, what were the old rules to influence? Yeah. Maybe it was the positional power thing that you're talking about. Kind of set us up.
Well, it was positional power. It was, influence based on rank, that belief system. And it was this idea that if you have executive presence, people will listen to you, follow you. The new rules by themselves are not revolutionary, right? There are rules like be agile, be a storyteller, be inclusive, be courageous. But it's the way that they're bundled and the way that they're presented in the book, which, by the way, is very conversationally written. It is not an academic textbook. And the rules, 10 of them, are grouped into sections. And the first section, before you can try to have influence, is to know why you want to have influence. What is so unwavering to you and so non-negotiable in terms of your passion and your drive and your idea that you want to have influence for it, right? You want to be seen, you want to be known for it. So there's 3 rules that sort of unpack the idea of purpose and why, right? You have to know who you are and why you want influence before you proceed. Then we talk about who you want to influence. It's not everyone with a pulse and a checkbook, right? You and I both know that there are certain people who are not right for us. And there are certain communities where we just don't align. Then it moves into the how and the where, and there are rules that attach to that. So the rules by themselves, the words, I don't think are going to knock anybody out of their seat. But the way they're explained, the way they're packaged in the book, they make it accessible for people. And I think that's the part that's been missing. We all want to know we matter. Whether you're a behind the scenes person, you're a coder, and you just want to be heads down and get your work done, you want to know you matter. Or you're the CEO of the company out in front, talking to the media. We all want to know that we have a voice and that voice means something.
I often say that influence is power, that if we but leadership is influence. And so if we can lead ourselves well, lead others well, then that will help us build more influence, which then leads to power for myself, power for others, empowering others, empowering myself. And using that is so valuable for everybody. And that leads me to my question of that's my viewpoint, right? Who do you believe should be thinking about this right now? Like, who did you write the book for, and who should be thinking about the way that they influence others?
I wrote the book for a younger generation. I'll be honest with you. I wrote it for a younger generation. I wrote it for women. I wrote it for voices that have felt, again, that they had to wait their turn before someone would tap them on the shoulder, like I did for 20 years, and say, okay, now we want to hear from you. I wrote the book for them. But what was so interesting is I'm getting feedback that the book is being shared with mid and senior leadership in organizations, because they've read all the textbooks. They've done the seminars like I had. They've done all that, and they're still missing something. There's a piece of them that says, is it really about looking a certain way? Is it really about having scripted messages that communicate empathy when I really don't feel it? Is it about the packaging, or is it about who I am as a person? And so they're actually loving the book. So it's interesting that we can write it for an audience who, yes, they're definitely getting it. But there's a different audience that I think is also seeing it. And so I don't want to say the book is for everyone, but I think anyone who is just wondering if there's a little bit more left in the dish, and they want to see if they can get it.
So for those individuals, let me ask you this. That led me to another question.
Okay.
Thanks for setting me up, Lida, for all my questions. I appreciate that.
Happy to help.
You're welcome. This whole idea of some of those people, some of those individuals thinking, well, empathy, I don't, like you say, that's part of the idea behind influence and doing these things, but I don't really feel like I have a ton of that. Like I don't have a lot of that to give, or that's naturally not a tendency of mine, is to go out and just pour down, empathize with somebody and like, right. Like this is not my thing. Does that mean I'm already kind of at a negative, right? Yeah. Like, am I already digging out of a hole?
No, because this book doesn't say there's one way or the highway, right? So for instance, one of the rules is to be real. And I specifically talk about that I didn't want to say authentic. And I use the word authentic. We all do. But, Merriam-Webster Dictionary gave it the 2023 word of the year, right? It's being celebrated. But if I said to you, Scott, be authentic with me, you'd be like, well, I thought I was, right? Well, I mean, I thought I was being authentic. But if I said, let's get real here, there's a different understanding of that. So I use the word be real because I think that's what people can understand when it comes to being human, right? There's a humanness. There's almost a vulnerability that comes. And yeah, it's scary. Absolutely, it's scary. We fear being judged, right? If I'm going to raise my hand and say, I think this project is going the wrong direction, or I have an idea of how we can make things better for the company, I could get laughed at. I could be, tossed out of the meeting. People could snicker. I don't want to be judged, but we have to. We have to be, and that's why the first rule is courage, right? We have to have courage to move through that if we truly believe what we're talking about. I was scared writing the book. I share some very personal insights and stories that I even said to my husband, do I go that far? And he's like, I think you kind of have to. I was like, okay. And I share a voice that's a little bit more conversational in the book. And my readers who've read any of my 6 other books are going, this doesn't sound like a textbook. It's not. So there's always that fear of judgment. But one thing I do encourage, and going to your empathy question, I think this plays in. I'm a big fan of being authentic and being real. If I ask you a question and you choose to answer in person or online, I expect you're going to give me a real answer. You're going to tell me what you really think, right? You believe in that. You're excited about that. You think that's a bad idea. But I don't believe in transparency. I am not a fan of being transparent. I think there's risk there. I think we can go too far. So I talk about that in the book that, for someone who says, I don't want to share everything about myself with my team because it's none of their business. I agree. It is none of their business, but we have to be real with them so that when we do go to those conversations that are a little bit, behind the curtain, that we're sharing our truth. We're sharing what we believe, but we don't have to tell people everything. And I think for anyone listening who has young people in their life, teach them that about social media. Because we get in a lot of trouble when we think we have to jump on every trending topic and have a viewpoint on every geopolitical conversation. And it's very risky.
I really like this differentiation of be real versus be transparent. I think we seek transparency. I think that's the word we think about is like, why can't you just be transparent with me? Mm-hmm. But it's really this idea of real, like, why can't you just be real with me? And that word, I think that switch in that word is really interesting for people to think about.
I think we want our government to be transparent. We want, if you're a public company, your financials have to be there's transparency in business. But where is it written that someone who has endured trauma needs to tell you about that? We can still talk about ourselves and we can share what we're excited about and what we're up to and what we look forward to and dream about. But where is it written that we have to tell people everything?
That's good. That's good. I love that. Can you, because you opened the door for me, is there a story you can share with us from the book that kind of hits home?
Ooh, one of my stories or someone else's stories?
Oh, I'm going to leave it open. I'm going to leave it open, Lida, for you to just share what you think the listeners would like to hear.
I would say the hardest story that I shared and the one that I had the most angst around is in the chapter on credibility, where I talk about values, because the formula for credibility is values plus action equals credibility. And we have to live our values, but first we have to know what they are in order to have people trust us and see us as credible. And I'm talking about how value and integrity come together, and what happens when we live out of integrity with our values. And I shared a story. It was part of the reason I left corporate America, of working with a company. I was a new manager. I'd never managed people. I was originally hired to manage, I think 4 or 5 people. And then within a couple months, I had 10 or 12. And I had no idea what the difference between leading and managing was. And I suddenly had people in my office complaining about each other, PTO schedule. It was all this stuff I didn't know. But the thing that really hit home, where the values piece came in, is leadership wanted me to get rid of someone on my team. And getting rid of this person, having them quit, was a lot more cost effective than letting this person go, because they've been with the company a long time. And that made sense. I understood that part. It was how they coached me to make sure he would quit. And this person had a young family. He was well loved in the company. So here it is, a new manager. Now I got to get rid of the company treasurer. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I was coached to, send him meeting invites that were 20 minutes later than the actual meeting. So he would walk in late, not give him all the information. Today, it wouldn't work, right? It would be definitely looked at as bullying or inappropriate. And I wished, looking back, that I had had the confidence and I had stayed true to my values to say this isn't right. But I didn't know enough and I didn't speak up. And the person left and was devastated. And when he quit, I wanted to quit with him. I had young kids, wasn't willing to put myself in that position. But I can tell you, if you've ever gone through something where you compromise your values, you learn you'll never do it again. And wow. Yeah, it was awful. It was, and but I admit I did the wrong thing in the wrong moment, and it stayed with me. So I shared that story in the book, because I think we're all faced with go, no-go decisions, and we know something's wrong, or maybe we try to justify it. but we have to live true to our values. That is the only way this works. This thing called life and influence is if we really tell people what we stand for and then they see us acting that way. So I learned a hard lesson. This person went on to do great things. I did not keep in touch. He did not want to keep in touch with me. So I shared that painful lesson in the book.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
There are a lot of happy stories in the book too.
I'm sure there are. I think that we learn a lot from the pain. We learn from the good too. We remember the pain probably a little bit more because of what it does to us. You know, it kills us a little bit inside, and I can sense that just in you telling that story. I can see that it was still a little hard to say.
And I have to say, on no podcast have I shared that story. So your listeners have an exclusive, but
here first, everybody, here first.
Oh no, but it's, that's where I say that what I'm asking readers to do in the book, to go to that place of vulnerability. Yeah. Now, you don't have to share every mistake you've made, but you have to know what they were and what got you there, because you don't want to repeat them. And I learned a very hard lesson. And to share that lesson, if that helps someone else avoid compromising their values, it's worth it to me. To be vulnerable like that. So I was willing to do it.
That's amazing. Gosh, Lida, thank you so much. That's really good. And it's a risk putting that out there like that. And you've done it in the book and you've done it on the show. And I commend you for it as an example of, yes, we don't need to divulge all of our dirty laundry out into the world. But if we know that there's a piece of that story that has shaped me and who I am, that it can help shape somebody else, I think you're going to build that much more respect, especially with these generations now where they see so much inauthenticity online, lack of realism online. And it's really hard to know what's real and what's not anymore. And that's a real story you just told. And I value that.
Well, and I think that's where intention comes in, right? I knew that I made the decision to share a story like that in the book. So I'm obviously comfortable sharing it on a podcast. I just hadn't before. There are stories I didn't put in the book, and there are stories that are nobody's business and they don't support the book. So I think when we think about how far to go, to your earlier question about, how far do we go in sharing? I think about that ahead of time. I've had clients who've gone through cancer, and their first response to me is, so now do I have to become a poster child for the, breast cancer or what? And I was like, no, that's your choice if you want to tell people. If you've been a domestic violence survivor, it's your choice if you want to tell people and do something with it. Otherwise, no, you don't have to. So I made the choice to share it. And I think that's the key point here, is it's about being in control. You control online and in person how far you want to go.
You talk often about the desire to make a difference. That we all have the potential to make a difference. And I also say, we're going to make an impact. It's either going to be a good one or a bad one. And we can decide which one it's going to be based on our actions and how we behave. What's your thoughts on how we do that to make a positive impact and really live out our potential that we are making a difference?
Well, and I think to your point, not everyone wants to be a leader. And I think we need to recognize that. I do a lot of work with the military. For 15 years, I've been teaching military service members how to exit the military and join the civilian culture. And one of the things they say often is, I don't want to be the boss. I don't want to be the leader. I just want to do a good job and know that I made a difference and come home at night. And I think there are a lot of people like that, they don't need their name in headlights. They don't want to be the face of something. They just want to know that it mattered. And that's where I say, I think for young people, they're very mission driven. They're very vision driven. They have their own ideas. And when you start asking them about that, when you start sort of peeling back what their view of the world is, you learn a lot. And one of the things I talk a lot in the book about is asking questions and then listening without judgment. And that's something that those of us who've been around the block a few times, we forget that we have to be willing to say, here's what I think would work or be a good idea or how we could move things forward. What do you think? And make sure the right people are in the room, and then listen. You're not going to give up anything. No one's going to take your opinion away from you. But there's a trust that you give the people. There's a psychological safety, right, to use that term, that you give people when you ask that question and they feel comfortable enough to share, and then you just build on it. One of my clients had a great example. She had an initiative that she was going to push for the organization. She happened to be a CEO. And she was really excited about it. She got her team together and she shared it. And one person in the room who happened to represent LGBTQ community said, that really doesn't work for my community. And everybody got quiet, like, oh man, you're going to be in so much trouble, right? Because here he put a roadblock on the CEO's process. And she looked at him and she said, thank you. Please tell me more. That's what I think we need to do more of. That's how that person made such impact on the direction of an initiative by just saying, I don't think that works for me and my community. And then was given the space to be able to say, that may be the biggest impact that person makes. They didn't cure cancer. They didn't stop a war, but that's huge to that person's team and what they believe in.
And I think even if that person completely disagreed, that thank you, please tell me more, is a gateway to start building influence. And I don't even have to take your suggestion. I can still go off and do my thing. But thank you, tell me more about that, at least helps you feel, well, now if we are actually listening or hearing the thing, right? Instead of just like saying the words. But I think that's a values thing of what you talked about. Am I credible? Because if I say, thank you, tell me some more, and then I'm like, checking my watch and, other things like body language shows I'm not really interested in what you have to say, my credibility is automatically discredited. So I think that's awesome. Really, really good. I love this because I'm gonna put so much pressure on you now, Lida. Are you ready? I know you're ready for it. What is the bomb drop moment here for us right now? Like, summing all this up on influence, on what people need to be thinking about right now when they are thinking about that in their lives and work and at home, what is the bomb drop moment? What do you really want people to remember?
I want people to remember that they shouldn't wait. This is not about waiting. This is not definitely being prepared, but this isn't waiting until you get the job, until you have the title, until somebody asks you to speak or sit at the big kids table. This is now. This is now. The world needs us. Our companies, our communities need us to start sharing who we are and how we are. And it doesn't mean being loud and creating a lot of distraction. It means being thoughtful, intentional, following the rules as I lay them out. And it is not about waiting. You may be sitting on an idea or a thought or a vision that changes everything for the better. And if you don't share that, then we all lose.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
How do we get a hold of the book?
Amazon, wherever books are sold. It's selling really well internationally, believe it or not, which surprises me. And my website is newrulesofinfluencebook.com. Website Lida360.com. I'm all over social media, so I'm not hard to find.
Okay, I figured. And your name, I don't think people are going to get confused about which Lida is out there in the world. So
there's just one. Yeah.
Just one. All right, Lida, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate the value you've given me and my people.
Thank you. You do a great conversation. I appreciate the opportunity.
The new rules of influence, they exist because the old rules of influence are getting old. And they're not really working anymore. That whole positional power, that whole thing of like, I am the boss and what I say goes, and you just need to listen to what I say because this is who I am, and you see the label on the door and all that stuff, If that is the way your work leading, you are probably getting compliance. You're saying, hey, my people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I say, yeah, but are they engaged? Are they just have compliance, or do you have actual engagement with your individuals? Are they just cogs in the wheel? And do they feel like they're just cogs in the wheel and they're just doing the thing because they got to do the thing because they got to get a paycheck? Or are they actually integrated and engaged in the work? That's something that you need to be thinking about. We talked about this idea a lot about being real. I love that. Like I said it on the show, the real versus transparent idea. How can we manage the things we share, make sure that they're relevant while still remaining real? Like, let's be real about who we are and what we're doing and who the other people in the room are and how we can actually influence them in ways that doesn't discredit us, that doesn't downplay who we are, but really empowers me and empowers you. And that is what we're talking about. And lastly, this is so smart. Values plus action. That actually makes you credible. Because the values themselves, we've all seen it. The values on the wall, the values on the website. How many of you actually can recite all of your values? Question. But do we pair them with action? And did we start doing that, but then now we don't anymore? Our credibility will get dinged if we also live that same way. I'm grateful for Lida. I'm grateful for all the things she shared on the show. If you want to find out more information about me or check out the show notes where there's going to be more information and links to the things referenced in this episode, visit skotwaldron.com. And lastly, I'm asking for a little bit of love, just a little bit. So please take a moment, follow, rate the show. The algorithms like that, and it helps me get the word out. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And until next time, stay unlocked.